After a nearly perfect offensive start to the season, the Rangers hitters have gone ice cold and dropped the last two games after an opening day sweep. Also, we're going to take a look at how the rotation stacks up one time through the order, 5 games into the season. All that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked on to the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan since 2010, the founder and host for all 5 seasons of this Locked On Rangers podcast. Thank you all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers and subscribe on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Maybe you want to comment of how the Rangers can fix their offense besides just like getting more hits. I don't know. Whatever that is, go ahead and do that. We are just jumping up in the subscribers the last couple of weeks, really just the last week since opening day. Thank you all so much for the support. New listeners, welcome. Old listeners, welcome. We're going to get into the offense going ice cold and the rotation, how it stacks up one time through the order. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, this Rangers offense has managed a total of 2 runs so far in 2 games against the Baltimore Orioles, who have not exactly been throwing the best of the best starting pitchers out there. And if you want to go back to Sunday's game, they only scored a pair of runs in that game and the finale against Philadelphia. So after putting up double-digit runs in the first 2 games of the season, this Rangers offense has gone just straight up ice cold. And most of these runs have come through solo home runs. The only 2 in the last night, Tuesday night loss came from solo home runs from Nathaniel Lowe and Adolis Garcia, both of their first home runs of the season. There was a little bit more offense in last night's game than there was on the Monday night game, but it's really hard to have less offense than you had in a game where you had 2 base runners, 1 hit, in a game where the Rangers didn't even face elite starting pitching. The Baltimore Orioles were kind of scrambling. Kyle Bradish was knocked out due to injury after an inning and 2/3. He allowed both the base runners in that one. So maybe the Rangers weren't lucky that Kyle Bradish was injured. Hopefully he is okay. Another scary injury in that one was Josh Smith, who took a hit by pitch to the face, was taken to the local hospital, was hit basically on the mouth, which, again, if you do have to get hit in the face with a fastball, not that there's a good place, but in kind of the jaw, mouth area feels like the safest. And it turns out he was mostly okay. He was taken to the hospital, was able to get treated there, was back in the Rangers clubhouse the very next day, was not in the lineup, and is not in the lineup for this Wednesday afternoon finale, where the Rangers are going to be facing off against Grayson Rodriguez, one of the top pitching prospects in all of baseball, versus Jacob deGrom in his second start. Hopefully can be a little bit better than the first one. We'll get into that in tomorrow's episode of what happens there, or I should just say the next episode, because there'll be 2 Wednesday episodes today. But the Rangers were absolutely just shut down by Tyler Wells, who was supposed to be the starter in the second game of that series. 5 perfect innings with a pair of strikeouts, and the Rangers just couldn't do anything. Then in comes Felix Bautista to close out the 9th inning. It was still a close game because the Rangers pitching did a really good job. All 3 pitchers that pitched in that Monday game, Jon Gray with his 6 1/3 innings. The only runs that he allowed are both on solo shots, one from Jorge Mateo and one from Gunnar Henderson. So both left side infielders were the ones who got to him. Besides that, he looked absolutely fantastic and had, I'd say, the strongest start of any Ranger starter the first time through the order. Cole Reagans was able to get through an inning in 2/3 without allowing any hits, did allow a pair of walks, but looked really good there. And Ian Kennedy had 3 strikeouts in, I believe, what was his first outing of the season. A perfect inning of work, all 3 coming on changeups, 6 swing and misses in his 1 inning of work. Really, really impressive stuff. Yes, it was the first outing for him on the season. A guy who just barely made the roster, but still barely. Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, and he was on that roster. So he is earning his spot in his one outing. We'll see how much that can stack up. I really like what I saw from his changeup, but this offense has been very, very woeful for the last 3 games. Rangers did get those runs from Adolis Garcia and Nathaniel Lowe, and an extra base hit from Josh Young for insurance towards the end of this game. It was not close. The Rangers were lit up in the starting pitching department, which was exactly what they thought they wouldn't be getting this season. A really rough first outing for Andrew Heaney. But the Rangers offense wasn't able to do much of anything against these Orioles pitchers. I mean, Kyle Gibson looked absolutely phenomenal in this one. Now, I'm not trying to throw shade at Kyle Gibson at all. He allowed a pair of runs, both of those solo shots, 5 strikeouts, 6 hits, no walks in 7 innings of work, while still not even throwing 90 pitches. He was not just good, he was incredibly efficient. These Rangers hitters were just pounding balls into the ground and striking out and just not doing the best job of facing off against Kyle Gibson, who is a real pro. We know what he can do. He had a great stint with the Rangers when he was in Texas, made an all-star team, and was traded at midseason to the Phillies along with Ian Kennedy, who pitched in was it last night's game or was it the game before? I've already forgotten. It's been 3 seconds that I've already forgotten. No, it was the game before, Monday night's game. And the Orioles had to scramble with their starters. And the reason why Grayson Rodriguez is pitching in this series finale is supposed to be Kyle Gibson's day. It's supposed to be the 2 opening day starters for their respective teams facing off in this series finale. But because of that injury, the Orioles had to scramble and go and get their starting pitcher for the next game in Tyler Wells to come in and pitch 5 perfect innings in relief as basically the kind of impromptu tandem piggyback starter. But it would have been nice for the Rangers to be able to get to him, but apparently not. Maybe Orioles pitching is just absolutely phenomenal this year, and we just don't know. There's a lot of young guys, a couple of veteran guys. They did not spend a whole lot of money this offseason, so I wasn't exactly expecting them to come out and just shut down this Rangers offense. I mean, the Rangers just absolutely dominating the Phillies' top 2 starters, 2 ace-level guys, 2 former All-Stars, but then their offense gets shut down when they face the likes of, Kyle Gibson or Tyler Wells or Bailey Falter on Sunday. Like, it just doesn't really make sense. But again, it's a small sample size, and we're only 5 games into the season. The Rangers do still have a winning record. I don't know that they are still on top of the division. They're tied with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim at 3-2, leading the American League West. Coming up, we're going to look at how this rotation stacks up their first time through the order, who has impressed, who has faltered, and what we're expecting from this bullpen, who has been absolutely fantastic to start this season. But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets for your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy all the tickets for sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun you'll have. If you are wanting some last-minute tickets to some Rangers games, if you're listening to this in the hour or so that I'll get before this episode posts, before the Rangers afternoon game, you can, or if you're trying to get tickets to the next Jacob deGrom start, whenever that happens to be, you can go find those there. They're easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area, and you get images of seat views. So snag the tickets without the stress. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, this Texas Rangers starting rotation is the entire story of the offseason. It's stories number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the offseason, because that is where the Rangers spent their money. It's where they spent their efforts. It's where they needed the biggest improvement coming off of last season. And for the most part, one time through the order, the Rangers have gotten that. They've gotten decent outings from all of their starters so far, except for one Andrew Heaney. It was a very, very rough start to his Rangers tenure. Got absolutely lit up, did not make it through the third inning in this one, but the Rangers pitching out of the bullpen was able to come in and pick him up. Andrew Heaney looked like he had lost a few ticks on his fastball. It looked like it was pretty easy to get to, and the thing we know about Andrew Heaney is that he is going to allow a lot of home runs. Usually he's not going to allow a whole lot in the walk department, but he allowed a pair of walks in 2 2/3 innings, allowed a pair of home runs and just 2 strikeouts in 2 2/3 innings with 7 hits, 7 runs. All of them were earned, and it was a real struggle to watch him pitch through this Baltimore lineup, which is a solid, decent lineup, but he should have been able to get more than 2 2/3 innings of work out of him. 69 pitches was not super efficient. He was not able to go deep into this game, which, again, is something that we kind of knew about Andrew Heaney. He is not going to go particularly deep into games. He is a big strikeout guy, so he is not necessarily the most efficient with those pitches. Not that other strikeout guys can't be efficient, like we have seen Jacob deGrom do and Nathan Eovaldi do at times, and like we saw Lance Lynn do quite a bit. He was a guy who was very efficient with his pitch count, but still was able to get strikeouts. But a rough outing for him, coming off the backs of the best start from any Ranger starter the first time through this rotation. Jon Gray, fantastic outing, 6 1/3 innings, 4 hits. Unfortunately, half of those were solo home runs to the left side of the Orioles infield, which was the difference in the 2-0 game. But he only allowed a pair of walks and 7 strikeouts. Was really, really dominant. We saw what he could do with that fastball and slider/sweeper combo. The Rangers introduced him to that sweeper pitch. They were talking about it on the broadcast in the Tuesday night game, about how it's a new pitch. It's been around for a couple of years. It's just that StatCast is finally tracking it. If you don't know what a sweeper is, it is basically a modified slider. Jon Gray's best off-speed pitch when he came over to the Texas Rangers was his slider. Traditionally, a slider breaks up and down, or kind of 1 to 7 o'clock if you're thinking about on a clock with analog clock. That's kind of how it breaks. But with a sweeper, it's a little bit more horizontal, left to right or right to left, whatever way, depends on how the pitcher is throwing it. So the Rangers introduced him to that sweeper to give him kind of a second breaking ball that he could able to use more efficiently, that he didn't really have all that much. He has a curveball and he has a changeup that he uses fine, but the sweeper is a very effective pitch for him, and we got to see Kyle Gibson using a little bit of it in that start where he dominated the Texas Rangers on Tuesday night. But a very, very great outing from Jon Gray, not Andrew Heaney. And one time through this rotation, we have a 6 1/3 inning outing for Jon Gray with a 2.84 ERA. Martin Perez finished 1 out shy of a 6-inning outing himself, has a 1.59 ERA. Then we have Nate Eovaldi, who made it 5 innings, Jacob deGrom, who made it 3 2/3 innings, and Andrew Heaney, who made it 2 2/3 innings in his first start as a Texas Ranger. Overall, not super great. Only 3 of your guys got to 5 innings, but you kind of knew that about Jacob deGrom. Andrew Heaney was just kind of a random bad start, which, again, happens at times. Even a rotation filled with 5 major league certified dudes who know how to get through bad outings. Occasionally, you're going to have some blow-up starts from even the best guys. I mean, we saw Jacob deGrom on a limited pitch count. And I think if he was up to 100 pitches, he probably could have gotten through 5 innings. And Nathan Eovaldi was also on a little bit of a limited pitch count. I believe it was about 84 pitches for him. But he was efficient enough. He did allow a few runs, but again, the Rangers were absolutely shellacking the Phillies, so him just getting through those innings and eating those up, that was a big, big thing for him. But if you would have told me that one time through the rotation that Jon Gray would have had the most impressive start, I would kind of raise an eyebrow at you and said, okay, interesting. But it's not completely out of the question. And I think that all these guys being in this rotation, it does kind of foster that competitiveness between each other. I mean, it's a little different than the position players who, when one guy heats up and they're all in the field together, in the lineup together, like, oh, this guy's having a great day at the plate. I need to step it up. We need some runs, and I want to, go out and dominate there. But in the best rotations, passing the baton each day and seeing what the guy before you did and being like, I want to go and, be a little bit better than that guy. And I also want to encourage him to be his best as well. That's what the best rotations do. And I think having a rotation of guys who are literally all in their 30s, from age 31 to 35, I guess 34. I don't know whether listening Jacob deGrom is 35. He's not 35 yet. This is his age 35 season. He doesn't turn 35 until June. But having a rotation full of those dudes who all have some really, really great stuff, who know how to go through and dominate a lineup, whether it's against the Orioles or against the Phillies or against the Cubs in this upcoming series at I was about to say Fenway, Wrigley, at Wrigley, which should be a really interesting series. The Cubs have a really, really weird team, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this Rangers squad looks against them, and hopefully can get a series win, because they've already had the series loss early in this one. The Rangers have two of their most difficult series in the month right back-to-back to start it off, but there are some easy, breezy, beautiful cover girl series coming up, so hopefully the Texas Rangers can take advantage of that. But this rotation, again, really impressed with what I saw from Jon Gray and Martin Perez, the two only really consistent guys in this rotation last year, really carrying their weight in this one, and being able to go fairly deep into the game. That was a thing that I also really appreciated about them, being able to be on a higher pitch count. Jon Gray threw 97 pitches in his start, and I believe Martin Perez was above the 90 pitch mark. I think he might have been around 95 or so. Doesn't really matter, but he was one of the ones that was a little bit more ready for the season. He also pitched in the World Baseball Classic. Granted, in one of his outings there, he got absolutely lit up. 98 pitches, for Martin Perez in his first start. He got a little bit lit up in one of his outings there, so wasn't able to go as deep into the game and get as much work, but I was still really impressed that he was able to go 98 pitches in his first start of the season. The Rangers needed that. They were able to get some really good work out of their pen in that one, and really just in general so far this season, a great job with the bullpen. Coming up, we're going to look at what that bullpen has done so far and how it has acquired the best ERA in the American League through 5 games into this season. But first, this episode is brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM. Pro Baseball GM is the coolest game I have played in a long time, and I've always thought that I'd be a great Major League GM. Turns out it's not really all that easy. If you had the same thought and fantasized about managing your own franchise, go and download Pro Baseball GM immediately. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of the franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and your fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff, manage team finances, scouting and drafting players, manage through difficult personalities and through injuries, navigate your franchise through free agency and all the ups and downs of the season. Locked On Rangers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up in the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com, Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. Now, this Rangers bullpen has been absolutely dominant, and it's kind of hilarious that the biggest question mark that this team had going into the season was about their bullpen, and their bullpen has been absolutely fantastic. Nobody in this bullpen has an ERA over 3.3, and that is just Brock Burke, who has only allowed 1 run. Nobody in the bullpen has allowed more than 1 run. Yeah. That's right. Jonathan Hernandez has allowed a run, and Brock Burke has allowed a run, and that's it. Those are the only 2 guys to allow runs in this entire bullpen. It's absolutely phenomenal stuff from this Texas Rangers bullpen. They're getting it from literally everybody, from Will Smith, who has the only save of the season so far, which again I think was more outing specific, the lineup that he was facing in that moment, which I think is what we're going to get a lot of with Bruce Bochy and how he manages his bullpen. It's going to be more of a, all right, let's see exactly what the matchups are and who is, feeling good right now, who is pitching well, and who is the best person for the scenario, as opposed to having a traditional closer. I think if they were going with one, it would probably be Jose Leclerc, but again, this is a bullpen full of guys who all can pitch very, very well in their different situations, including Dane Dunning, who I believe it was Sam Patton in the YouTube comments that suggested that we start calling Dane Dunning the janitor because he's going to have a lot of mop-up duty this year. Shouts to you, Sam. I love that nickname. I think we should stick with it because he was doing some great mop-up work in that Tuesday night loss that already seemed lost when you have your starting pitcher not get you through 3 innings and he's already given up 7 runs. Even with a guy like Kyle Gibson who can be lit up every once in a while on the mound against you, he was dominating. The Rangers offense wasn't going to do anything. Having those guys who can come in and just eat up innings, having to only use 2 relievers in an outing where your starting pitcher couldn't get you through 3, that's huge. That's absolutely huge from both of these guys. Dane Dunning worked 4 innings of scoreless ball, only had 1 strikeout, a walk, and 1 hit, but still a perfect 0.000 ERA in 7 innings of work, a 4-inning outing and a 3-inning outing for him. Huge, absolutely huge for him. Same for Taylor Hearn, who has not been coming in the most high leverage situations, but he's still been able to get the job done. He was able to go 2 1/3 innings, perfect. Absolutely perfect against this Orioles lineup with 3 strikeouts. I really love his stuff out of the pen. I think that last year he was underrated. I think how poorly he did as a starter obviously really affected his numbers in general, but I think it overshadowed how effective he was as a reliever. That stuff plays up. He's able to go multiple innings when you need him. If you need him for just 1 inning to just be a lefty with a whole lot of gas and a nasty fastball, then he can do that for you as well. But a really, really nice outing for him and a nice outing for the Rangers in relief of Jon Gray. All the pitchers who worked in that one were fantastic. Cole Reagans, an inning and 2/3 of scoreless, hitless baseball, and Ian Kennedy with the 1 perfect inning with 3 different strikeouts, all on changeups, looking really, really nasty out of the pen. I am starting to trust this pen a whole lot more. The Rangers don't have a whole lot of really, really young guys. Cole Reagans is the only young guy in this one. He's in this bullpen. He's 25 years old. And the next youngest, well, I guess we have Jonathan Hernandez at 26, but he's been a pro for a while. Same with Brock Burke. Both those guys know what's up and have had some really, really good years in the past. I mean, Brock Burke, I should say good year, singular. But still, I trust Brock Burke very much with any lead in any situation that the Rangers deem fit to throw him out there. Jonathan Hernandez has pitched just 2 times, but he's pitched 3 2/3 innings. Allowing him to go multiple innings is a huge, huge plus for him, and that's something that I said when talking about this bullpen early on before the season, that pretty much all these guys, except for Will Smith, pretty much all these guys can go multiple innings. Maybe Ian Kennedy can just go 1 inning, but Jonathan Hernandez, Jose Leclerc, both those guys were starting pitchers until basically, I believe, Double-A was when both of them made the switch to the pen. So they do have quite a bit of stamina. If you need them to go multiple innings, they can do that. They can come in high leverage situations. They can get you through a couple of innings of high leverage situations if you need them to. And same with Taylor Hearn and Brock Burke. Both those guys have starters stamina and can come in and give you multiple innings of work or an inning and 2/3 or whatever you need. They can come in and get it. And I really love that about them. Same with Cole Reagans, who, I mean, was a starter in camp, basically. And it was because he did so well in camp and because his fastball ticked up just a little bit that really made all the difference in the world for him. Grant Schiller and I talked about it before the season when we were talking about prospects that impressed the most in camp. And Cole Reagans was the top of the list. He was the story of camp because some guys, if they just add a bunch of velocity, it doesn't necessarily make all the biggest difference in the world. But with Cole Reagans, with the stuff that he had, just that specifically made such a big difference. His fastball has such a good spin rate on it. It just didn't quite have the velocity. This is before he even moved into the bullpen where that velocity is definitely playing up. If he could stick as a starter with the increased velocity that he showed earlier in spring training, then I think that is a huge boost and he should be a starting pitcher. But for right now, the Rangers need all of their best arms in the pen. They need all of their best players, their fringe 40-man guys, their fringe decisions at the end of the roster. They need all of those guys up and making an impact. That's why Ezekiel Duran made camp made the roster out of camp. That's why he and Josh Smith both made the roster out of camps, because both those guys are good and both those guys can help you win baseball games right now. Ezekiel Duran has had a little bit of a rough go of it. His first 4 games, just hitting 111 and does not have a walk so far or an extra base hit. But again, he's made some pretty nice plays in left field, including last night. Took a ball on a hop, nearly nailed the runner at home. He's got a huge arm, and having him in left field and Robbie Grossman and his okay arm in right field just feels kind of weird to me. But I mean, that's where Ezekiel Duran has gotten the most playing time. He feels most comfortable in left field. He still has not played a whole lot in the outfield. But again, having those guys like Ezekiel Duran and Josh Smith both on the roster, same with Cole Reagans, it shows a commitment to winning, how this team is like, all right, this is it. It's winning time. This is what you do to turn a team from a bad baseball team into a good baseball team. You are focused more on the right now than the long-term picture, and that's the first time that the Rangers have been focused on the right now more than the long-term picture in quite some time, and it's honestly a really refreshing and enjoyable change of pace. Also having an elite bullpen with guys who know how to pitch, know their roles, and a manager who knows how to throw them in the right situations. I'm not trying to throw a bunch of shade at the last, 3-4 Rangers managers. Really just 3, I guess. If we're counting Tony Beasley, definitely don't ever want to throw shade at Tony Beasley. But the thing that I love about Bruce Bochy is that he is, I think it was tepid participation that I saw tweet this, and I kind of very much agree with his statement that Bruce Bochy is a great manager. He's not necessarily the best coach. That's something that Wash definitely was, and I think that Chris Woodward was as well. But in terms of just knowing how to manage a bullpen, manage personalities, manage a lineup, all those different things, and make the right tactical choice in the moment, and for the most part, he's spot on with it. I think that is what Bruce Bochy does so well, which is, again, is why he has 3 rings, why he has done such a good job, and he can have those coaches to coach up guys in different positions around him, and he doesn't have to be the one who's coaching everybody up, like was Ron Washington's strength, and I believe was Chris Woodward's strength as well. And he doesn't have to be Mr. Rah-Rah, never ever quit like Jeff Bannister. He can just go out there and put his team in a position to succeed with the lineup, with the usage of the bullpen, and all kinds of different stuff that he does there. And I have really loved seeing his little touch on these different moments. I've talked about it in Monday's episode about how they've made so many defensive adjustments, and basically every game until the Monday game. Of course, the second I talked about it on the show was the first time that they didn't do it. And they didn't do it in Tuesday's game either, of making defensive adjustments. But again, this team wasn't winning, so I guess that's kind of also what the change was there. But not being afraid to make some defensive substitutions late in games to kind of shore things up defensively and make sure that you're not having, you can get every little edge that is possible out there to win every single baseball game you can, because they all count the same. They all do count the same, and the Rangers need to get off to that hot start, to believe in themselves, to convince fans, and to convince the league that, hey, this team is legit. Hopefully they can avoid getting swept by the freaking Orioles again. The Rangers have not won a game against the Orioles in their last 8 attempts, and 3 of those were a 3-game series in Baltimore at midseason, where the Rangers were swept in 3 consecutive 1-run losses that made me want to absolutely throw my computer and my everything, myself, out a window, because it was so infuriating. The Rangers have lost their last 2 to the Orioles, but hey, at least they're not 1-run losses, and they're not going to get swept in a sweep of 3 straight 1-run losses. Hopefully Jacob deGrom can hop on the hill, and the Rangers offense can make Grayson Rodriguez's rookie debut a nightmarish one for him, and just turn this thing around heading into the weekend series against the Cubs. That's going to do it for today's episode. I'll be back with another show on Wednesday night talking about Jacob deGrom's second start and hopefully a Rangers win, getting back to winning ways. But that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. That'll do it for today's show. Until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.